So, welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're looking at apprenticeships. And my guest today to answer all our questions, everything we could possibly want to know about apprenticeships, is Sue Cole, who is the Senior Employer Responsive Manager. It's quite a title, Sue. The Senior Employer Responsive Manager for Apprenticeships at BMet, which is a college in Birmingham. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm sorry to fall over your job title like that, but it is a bit of a mouthful.
It is. It is.
So let me start with the kind of the obvious question, which is basically, what is an apprenticeship in modern terms? Tell us what that means today.
Okay, so an apprenticeship is a paid job, but you also combine that with structured training and study. So it's a perfect time for people to upskill if they, or start your career as an apprentice. So there's no age limit other than 16 plus for an apprentice. So it's perfect for all ages. And as an apprentice, you'd work for an employer as a minimum of 30 hours a week. You'd earn a wage. That wage is linked to minimum wages or what the employer wants and the level that you're on, which we can talk about later. They'll gain some real valid workplace experience. So they've got that. And in lots of cases, in paralegal terms, they'll get a national recognised qualification, which is a level 3 qualification. There are some standards that won't offer a qualification. That doesn't make them any less. It's just the way that standard, the makeup of that standard. But yeah, an apprentice is a paid employee. They train, and all the training is aligned to industry standards, which means they'll do their skills, knowledges and behaviours that the employers have agreed from the standard that has been written. So quite a nice way of starting and all upskilling yourself.
Great. So that gives us kind of a basic understanding of what it is. And we're going to look at it now from both the apprentice side and the employer's side. And I think even if you're someone hoping to become an apprentice and you're listening to this at the moment, let's have a look nevertheless at what the employer's side of it, because sometimes I think it's really helpful to understand it from the other perspective, as it gives you a better understanding of how it works from your side as well. So from the employer's perspective, how does it work? Where do you find an apprenticeship? What do you do? Just sort of talk me through how that works.
Well, there's a couple of things really. So from an employer point of view, there's a couple of questions as an employer I'd be asking them first, or they need to ask the company themselves first. So have they got the infrastructure to support an apprentice? Because as an apprentice, they're going to need support, they're going to need mentoring, they're going to need time for off-the-job studies. And do they have that infrastructure? And are they looking at employing, as we talked earlier, about upskilling the staff you've got, so internal or external? And then that helps with the growth. So as a company, they shouldn't be looking at buying a standard, if you like, because that's what they do. They should be buying the solution. Why do they want an apprentice? Because as an apprentice, you want to feel valued, you want to be mentored, and you want to grow within that company. So from a company point of view, you've got are you trying to cover a short-term problem with an apprentice, which then that isn't the answer? Or is it a long term? Are you trying to future-proof your business? And that doesn't mean just on recruitment, but it means sort of engineering support mechanisms within your company for retention. We find that the more apprentices that are mentored correctly within their workplace, developed, their retention within the company after their apprenticeship is quite lengthy. Apprentices, they want a roadmap. What do they need something to show where they're going within the company for their standard, their apprenticeship, but also what's their career progression in there. And so we've sort of said what a company should be thinking before they even start an apprenticeship. But apprentices often look at companies as well, thinking, what can this company give me long term? what is my career prospects within this company? And can they support me? Because it is a win-win at the end of the day. Apprentices have a lot to give a company, but you've got to look at that long term. As I say, future-proof your business and grow your own and develop the people and personnel that you have already. So as an employer, we mentioned paying wages. They've got their 20%. Well, it's not 20% now, is it? There's changes, but they've got at least a day a week for off the job. They've got to provide support, mentoring support. Well, have they trained their mentors already to do that? Because that's a job on its own, really. And they have to work closely with the provider. In our terms, it would be us. So we like to work closely with the employer, because if we can work together, we can make sure that apprenticeship is tailored to suit the apprentice and the employer and meet the needs of that.
But just before I ask you about the employee side, from what you've told me there, it just sounds like the impression that I've often got, and I think people think of apprentices, is, oh, cheap labour in a sense. But actually, it doesn't sound like that's entirely true. Yes, you may not be earning the best salary in the universe, but actually from the employer's point of view, and I think this is important to remember as well as an employee, there's a lot more to it than just, oh, well, we've got someone on minimum wage, great, get them working kind of thing. Or am I getting that wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. There used to be a concept, the perspective of an apprenticeship, oh, it's cheap labour. There was no weighting behind. It was the poor relative, if you like, than going to university. That has changed. The apprentice voice now, if you go into schools, they're talking apprenticeships all of the time now, rather than university. And from an employer, it does you can get people in and you can develop them to meet the business needs. You can grow them into and nurture them and get the behaviours you want your company to get. So from an employer point of view, there is a lot of output into making sure this is right. The long-term return is really valuable. But it's about the effort that goes in and the structure behind that apprenticeship programme in the first place. So an apprentice should be expecting quite a bit from an employer, really, because it works both ways.
No, that's good to know. And I'm glad to see that sort of attitude towards apprenticeships has changed, because they are such a powerful tool for getting into a career and developing yourself long term. So that's very positive.
That's right, because it used to be looked at as the skill, if you were a skill sort of in construction and the service sectors, an apprenticeship was for you. But if you wanted an academic route in life, you'd go to uni, or it wasn't good enough. But that's gone now. There's a route, there's an apprenticeship for most routes, really.
Brilliant. Okay, so now let's flip it over and let's look at it from the employee's point of view. So how do I find an apprenticeship? What am I likely to be paid? What am I likely to have to do? Let's kind of talk about it from that side.
Okay. So if you want to be an apprentice, so we're not looking at internal growth within the company. We're talking about a brand new apprentice to that company. If you're interested in that, firstly, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can apply directly to employers. And I would always recommend people look at employers, try and find some information around them, look at their websites, see what they've got to offer as an apprentice. And then I would also, and if you go onto their website, you'll always see adverts for apprenticeships as well. But nationally, there's find an apprenticeship. So if people Google find an apprenticeship, it comes up and it's a government website. You can link into it and you can filter to what you want, to what you need. So if you wanted to be a paralegal within a 20-mile radius of your home, you can filter that. So when new ones come in, you'll be alerted, which is great. And then that also tells them what provider or college that apprenticeship is with. Then you can apply. You can apply directly through colleges as well, because colleges will advertise their own. You apply, you attend an interview with the provider and the employer. And if you're successful, then you are signed up as an apprenticeship on an apprenticeship. You're paid, a salary. Now that salary varies from employer to employer and at the level that they're on. You've got a minimum wage for an apprentice, which is at the moment £8, or will be in the 26th of April. But some employers will pay more. If you're 19 or over and have worked for that company for 12 months or more, then you'll get paid the minimum wage for your age. But again, depending on the level, people will pay higher than that. I suppose one of the big things to think about as well, or the benefits of it, is that there's no cost to the apprentice at all. The employer or the government cover the costs. The employer covers the costs through the levy, which is a levy pot that they pay into. Or if they don't pay into a levy pot, then the government fund the apprenticeship. There's no tuition fees like you would if it was university. And there's no additional costs at all. So you'd be an employee. So you'd have the same responsibilities as any other employee, along, matching your job description. You'd need to complete your training program. So it's quite heavy because, you're working a full-time job. You're doing coursework. You'll get a terms and conditions employee agreement, a contract, which is always important to read because you have to sign that. So you are treated like an employee, other than you get additional time to do some training and tuition. So yeah, it's a really good route to take.
If you do become an apprentice, is there some kind of obligation on you to stay with that employer for a certain amount of time beyond the apprenticeship or anything like that? Or is it, I wouldn't suggest one would do this, but could you literally get your apprenticeship, qualify and leave?
The simple answer is yes, you could. But that's why we speak about earlier about the infrastructure within the company to support and grow apprenticeships. As I've sort of mentioned, the employer's contribution to an apprenticeship, it's quite hefty. They invest a lot of time and money into it, so they won't want to lose an apprentice. It's important that they get it right. But yes, you could. If you get an apprenticeship, you complete it. We don't recommend people move in while they're doing the apprenticeship, because then, depending on the timing, it could be that you cannot continue because the funding is no longer there. So it's very messy should anybody want to move. But that's why the recruitment process is so, so important. We talk careers all the way through the apprenticeship. What do you want to do next? So people have ideas of, what's going to happen. And normally, when they get to the end of the apprenticeship, they have a route within the company to go, or it's been a mutual discussion that it's no longer going to go ahead for whatever reason.
And you mentioned earlier the qualification that you get. Are there different kind of levels to apprenticeships then? I think you said a level 3 when you were speaking earlier, but are there other levels of apprenticeship as well?
There are, yes. So the level 3 I've spoke about is paralegal. And you've got lots of different levels in terms of, if you look at a level 2 apprenticeship, that's your equivalent to GCSE. Then the level 3 is your equivalent to A levels. Now, somebody that wants to do a paralegal apprenticeship might come out and say, well, I've already got A levels. Why do I want to do another level 3 equivalent? Well, my answer to that is you don't have the fundamentals behind the paralegal apprenticeship. So you would need to get that fundamental underpinning knowledge before you moved on. And then you can go to level 4, 5, which is your foundation degree, and then 6 and 7 is your masters. There is apprenticeships all the way through that. So you've got your advanced paralegal, you've got your chartered legal executive. The level 7s at the moment, there isn't funding. The government have pulled the funding for level 7s, but there is always a route to get those qualifications, depending on which way you want to go and the company you work with, because a lot of companies will have their own in-house structure of how they the route they're going to take on that.
Yeah, I think also it's worth mentioning that, and I'm going to do a little plug here, but NALP's qualifications are extremely reasonably priced, even at the level 7 level. So it's not like suddenly having to go off and pay university to do, a postgrad or a master's or something like that, where you're going to come up with a massive debt. I mean, the course fees are almost credit card
Yes.
worthy, as it were. So get yourself a 0% finance deal on a credit card and you can kind of sort that out. So as you say, even without government funding, there are absolutely ways to get those qualifications. And I think a lot of employers these days, even if it's not official apprenticeship scheme, are willing to either part fund or fully fund those qualifications, or even if they're not willing to fund it, they're willing to give you time off work, paid time off work to do them. So I guess the advice is, even if it's not exactly, if the funding's not there or the apprenticeship level is not there that you want, speak to your employer, because actually there's a lot of benefits to them, isn't there, for supporting you through this?
Absolutely, absolutely. They've invested so much money to get you to where you are. They're not going to want to lose you at the last hurdle. So the investment is very sort of negligible, isn't it, when it comes to the funding of a qualification, to what potentially business could be brought into it. So yeah, I think you've said that really well there. Talk to somebody.
And I think
Yeah.
also, as an employer myself, I know that good employees are kind of worth their weight in gold. So
Oh,
make sure
absolutely.
you're a good employee, and then hopefully your employer will absolutely support you through those kinds of things as well. Right, just got a couple more questions, but if anybody has got questions for Sue, then please pop them into the chat and we will come to those in just a minute, and hopefully Sue will be able to answer them for you. So Sue, once I've got my apprenticeship, and hopefully, as you say, I'm going to stay with that company, but of course, after time it might be that it's time to move on for whatever reason. What does an apprenticeship give me? I mean, is it something that feels very tied to a company, or is it something where I can go on and progress my career beyond that apprenticeship, and how would that work?
Yeah, I mean, but once you've gained an apprenticeship, you've got lots of things to offer another employer. Because I mentioned skills, knowledges, and behaviours. And you've said yourself earlier, a good employee is worth their weight in gold. And a good employee, it's not about skills and knowledge necessarily, it's about the behaviours. You can't You can teach them to a degree. You can teach the skills and knowledge, no problem. But people come with behaviours, whether they're good or not. And to break those behaviours, into model them into good ones, takes time. So if you've got good behaviours, you are worth your weight in gold, and you can move to a different employer. You can progress to any full-time employment or part-time. You can go into more senior roles. You can go on to university if that's what you wanted. If this is a stepping stone to university for you, you could start your own business, depending on what level you've done. So there's a raft of things that you could go on to, and I think it's really to use the level 3 as tasting what's going on in the company. What is it I most enjoy? What part of the paralegal did I enjoy? And looking at that route to go into and specialise in, so you can specialise in the route you want.
Why should we do an apprenticeship? What's the win-win on an apprenticeship?
Okay, so for me, you come out of an apprenticeship with no debt. You get real work experience. There's lots of professional networks out there that you wouldn't necessarily get anywhere else. You get an income and also national recognised qualifications. And I think those are the key parts, really, that you're putting, it's a step up to your career.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Sue, for that, because I've learned loads about apprenticeships today, and it is just really great to know that that there is that opportunity out there at those different levels, and that, as I said, that it is actually a respected way forward these days, unlike as we mentioned it was, say 20 years ago, when it was seen a little bit as a sort of the second cousin to a university education. So I'm really, really pleased. I think that's all a positive thing. And so thank you so much, Sue. That's Sue Cole, who is from BMet, which is Birmingham Metropolitan College in Birmingham. Very lovely city, which I visited recently. You have some fantastic restaurants in Birmingham, I have to say. So thank you so much for coming along today and answering our questions. If you've got anything else, if there are any other questions that you'd like to talk to Sue about, then obviously you can contact Birmingham BMet direct, or you can come through us here at NALP and have any questions, and we'll pass those on or do our best to answer them for you. If you want to know anything more about apprenticeships, then again, do get in touch with either BMet or with us here at NALP, and we said again, we'll do our best. We have got some other webinars coming up in the future, so do keep a lookout for the emails letting you know which webinars are happening and when. There's regular emails going out with a webinar every single month, so we hope you'll be able to join us for future ones of those. And Sue, maybe we can welcome you back once all of those bits where we said there are more questions than there are answers right now. Once we finally have the answers, maybe we can come back and do another apprenticeship webinar and kind of give everybody an update on that. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everybody for joining us. Do fill in the feedback survey if you get a chance, please. Nigel's popped that into the chat. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on our next one. Thank you so much.